to be doing, specifically in this session, I'll just kind of, for those of you who've done these workshops before, you know the drill, so just bear with me while I explain to those who may have not done this before. I'm going to, again, in a session like this where there's quite a few people in the Zoom session with us, I'm going to work through what I'm going to be presenting today, which is obviously blues and E. I'm going to walk through it, and I'm going to touch on as much as I can from a very wide spectrum, from beginner to intermediate to advanced, because everybody here is at a different level. And I just ask for a little bit of grace and patience. If you have heard some of this stuff before and you maybe are a little bit more advanced, just know that there's somebody in here who probably is maybe hearing this for the first time, and it's always good to hear stuff again and again and again. I know for me, I don't learn the first time through. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to be showing you in this session has taken me, I mean, I've been playing guitar for almost 30 years now, which is not a long time for some of you and quite a long time for others. And all of this stuff was learned in stages, little by little by little by little. So I'm gonna blast you with a bunch of stuff in an hour or more or less, and don't be not what's the right word? Don't be frustrated if you don't understand everything in an hour, because again, this has taken me little by little by little. But again, I'm going to try to explain it as best I can the way that I learned it, which was just self-taught, and this is how it makes sense to me. And if you know a different way about doing any of this stuff, like specifically scales, I'm not going to be teaching scales, although obviously scales are a big part of what we're going to be doing, because it just is. That's just a musical thing that you can't avoid. However, my brain does not remember scales. I look at everything as chord shapes. And if I can play the notes in the chord that I'm holding, then I am playing the scale, but I don't have to remember what the scale is, because as long as I'm playing the notes in the chord, I'm checking the scale box, and I can't make any mistakes because I'm just playing the chord shapes. I'm playing those notes in those chords. So it's kind of a fail safe, and that has always really been very helpful for me. So I'm recording all of this on my end, and I am not using Zoom for my recording device. I'm just using that as a way to reach you guys. I'm recording from my own cameras, which will have both the left and the right hand that you can see, and I'll be going back and forth. And at the end of this, you will have the video file, which you can access. You can either download it, or if you just want to save the link, you can access the video anytime. It'll never expire. And that's the basic format for this. And the message, or the message box is open. If you have questions that are simple, feel free to type away. If you have questions that obviously take a little bit more explaining, just raise a hand or unmute yourself, or ask to. If you just hit ask to unmute, it'll notify me, and then I know that you'll have a question. So all of that out of the way, and let's jump into some stuff here. Again, standard tuning that we're going to be in, and we're going to be playing in the key of E. So I wanted to start with E, and the next few months I'm going to be breaking this down with every single key, because last year's focus for these sessions was really songs, and then we talked a little bit about the caged system. And my real focus over the summer was, instead of just talking about the caged system as just like this thing you can use in any key, I was doing a lot of teaching on how do you use it in specific keys. And so I thought like that would be kind of a fun thing to do. So that's what we're going to do. So of course we have our E, and in the land of blues, we know that it's going to be a 1, 4, 5 chord progression. Our 1 chord is E. Our 4 chord in this context is going to be an A7. Our 5 chord is going to be a B7. Now, I'm looking at this as my first position of this 1, 4, 5. So that we'll call, this is kind of like home base. Everybody kind of knows that. Our next version of that is going to be out of the D shape. So D is going to be, as you know down here, is D, G, A. Well, if we move D up to E, so here's our first E, here's our second E at the 4th fret, and again, that's just a D chord. Our 1 would be there. 4, we're going to skip the G version of this because the G version up the neck really, really sucks, if you ask me. So I opt not to use G. I opt to use E and E shape. And the reason for that is if I make a G chord, G is holding the root notes for what that E shape is. So the G shape and the E shape are built in together. So again, that's a G, but then the E inversion of G is right there as well. Just wherever that root note is the G shape, and it's also the E shape. So again, the root note is going to give you a G shape, and it's going to give you an E shape. So up and down the neck, anytime I need a G, I'm going to opt for the E shape. Okay, so first E, A, B. Second version, there's E, there's A, and you can do it like that if you want to. There's B. Admit one more person. So again, that's just A moved up. So you've got 1, 4, 5 there. 1, 4, 5 there. Again, if you put a capo on, you'd be playing this D and you wouldn't be thinking much about it. So just kind of envision, if you need to, a capo, but otherwise, again, yes, this is E, but I'm looking at it as D at the moment. So I'm just going like, okay, that's a D, there's my G variant, and there's my A variant, but it just happens to be in the key of E. Okay, I got one wacky string there. So, first position, second position. Now third, just taking it from the E, our next E is going to be a C. And that's going to be at the root note at the 7th fret. So we know C is C, F, G. So if we bring that up, there's our E, there's our A, and again, I'm not going to go for the G, I'm going to go for the E. There's the B. So 1, 4, 5. Now I would suggest here that this fingering of an E7, so we have our E7 like this, up and down the neck. If you ignore the 4th string, but just make it like this. So literally what I've done is just removed that 4th string. That is a great version of an E7. And as a matter of fact, if you've seen the Robert Johnson photo, this is the chord he's holding. So anytime you see that picture and you see him doing this, he's making an E7 chord. That's what that is. There's also a picture of Big Bill Broonzy holding this exact same chord like that as well, up the neck. So, first position, second position, or sorry, first, second, third. And we're going to go to our next E, which is going to be at the 9th fret. There's our E. So if we're playing 1, 4, 5 in the key of A, it's A, D, E. So if we move that up, there's our E, there's our A, and instead of going to this B, I'm just going to take this A and move it up a whole step. That's a really nice trick. Every 4 chord comes a 5 chord as you move it up a whole step. So there's the B right there. The last one, again, is that G, which I'm going to ignore because I don't like playing that one. But the one thing I do want to mention is there's another great A7, which is that C7 chord shape all the way up the neck. So what I just walked you through is literally all of the 1, 4, 5 inversions that you would be playing in an E blues. It's the E, A, B all the way up and down the neck. And you might go, for those of you who've done this before, you might be like, yeah, I know that. For those of you who've never done this before, you might be going like, whoa, I don't know what you're doing. That's so much information. And this is how you absorb it. You start playing just with the chords, and then you start playing it up and down the neck. And you start playing around with that. And the great thing about this is now I can choose, after I know where those are, those different chords lie, I can start making choices as to which ones I want to use. So if I'm going to do a blues in E, and that's just that 1, 4, 5. Now I can, instead of going just the E down here, I can decide I want to do a different E. So I can go, you know, 1. A there, or I can go A there, or I can go A there, or I can go A there. And I'm just going to take a chord progression and I'm going to grab different versions of those chord shapes. And the game that I play with myself is I do a straight 1, 4, 5, 12 bar blues. I do it, and I have to I do it one way once for like one verse. The next time through, I have to pick a different chord for either every chord or at least one of them. And then the next time through, I have to pick up a different one. And the next time through, I have to pick up a different. So it's all, I force myself to make those choices, because if I don't force myself to make the choices, I never will, because it's unfamiliar. So you have to just take a blues, take this 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I gotta make a choice because I can't go back to this E. I gotta pick a different one. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, Now I have to pick a different A because I already used that one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to pick a different B. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Now I gotta pick something else because I've done, and I've gotta, you know what I mean? So. I already used that, so I can go. So, I'm not focusing on right hand stuff here because I'm trying to learn the left hand. Like, there's I think where a lot of people get tripped up a lot of times is they're trying to work on like too many things at once. They're trying to build that right hand and they're trying to build the left hand at the same time. And there comes a time when you may have to focus a little bit more on one than the other. Like if you're trying to learn how to finger pick and you don't know how to do that, then you want to have very uncomplicated left hand stuff so you can focus on the right hand. But if you're trying to learn how to play up and down the neck, you don't need to have a complicated right hand. You need to focus more on the left hand and you need to make those chord shapes. So all I'm doing is going thumb, thumb, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'm basically what I call it thumb strumming because I'm going thumb, strum, thumb, strum, thumb, strum, thumb, strum, thumb, strum, thumb, strum. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So, the reason why I'm doing an uncomplicated right hand is because I'm focusing on my left hand right now. And I want to try to figure out where are those chord shapes. Now, if you know your scales and you know where all of your root notes are, then obviously you have a leg up here because you know where those chords are. If you don't know where those root notes are, like I didn't, I had no idea where root notes were for years. I just played songs. Like, here's how this song goes. And I had no idea like where... If you like, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago asked me where the root note in the chord was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. And I had been playing at a professional level for 15 years at that point. So the point is that like, if you know where the root notes are, that's awesome. But if you don't, just know that these chord shapes, the root note, you know, there's our root note in E, that I'm fretting right now. There's E, there's E, there's E, there's E, there's E. So now I can just take those chord shapes. There's A, there's A, there's A. You know what I'm saying? And I can now know where those root notes are. And I'm building a much broader vocabulary in my mind based on just these simple chord things up and down the neck. So, again, any blues you're playing in E, you're going to be using one or two variants here. There's really no song, well, maybe Reverend Gary Davis stuff. He's kind of an exception here. But almost every other song will probably use two different places up and down the neck for each of these chord shapes. You wouldn't typically play a song and use all 5 different spots up and down the neck for E. It would just, I think, to me, just gets to sound a little bit ridiculous. However, if you're new to this and you need to practice where those spots are, use them. A great thing is to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you want to be really obnoxious, you can go back up to this B7 here, which is just basically back down to just a repeat of that. But taking all of those, taking E up and down the neck, A up and down the neck, B up and down the neck. And now you're able to play in any spot. So again, to my point here, let's take a song like Key to the Highway. I got the key to that highway where I'm built and bound to go. Well, I'm a living here running, walking is most too slow. Well, down to that road where I'm better known. We're good men away from home. So what I'm doing here, that's literally the entire song. And it's also Trouble in Mind. Well, I'm blue. Well, I won't be blue always. Well, then sun gonna shine my back door someday. You get the idea as far as, so many songs exist there. And I'm just using this as an example to give you an example here where you have a song that's just using two of the different spots. We've got our E here and we've got our E there. We've got our B here and we've got our B there. Now A just gets one spot. We don't do a different A version there. However, you can do any kind of substitutes here. So if I go E to my B to my A, back to my E to my B, C#7, B, back. I can do that anywhere now. I can go E, B, to my A, back to B, up, down, back. So I can now substitute, I can chord substitute, and I can grab any of those other E's, and I can grab any of those other A's, and I can grab any of those other B's, right? Because we're just playing out of that 1-4. I mean, this is a 1-5-4. That you know what I'm saying as far as the chord progression. But the beautiful thing about this is, yes, we're talking about blues, but because so much of the music we know today has been built on that formula, this works in any musical genre. I mean, unless you're playing something that's, that doesn't exist on, the Western style of music, right? If we're going Eastern, it might be something different. But if you're playing any genre, you're going to be able to use this 1-4-5 in E. And the great thing about this is that as long as you don't change your tuning, this never changes. It's always, if you're playing in the key of E, these E chords exist in the same spot. Again, if you don't change your tuning, none of this will ever change. it is where it is. It exists where it exists as long as you're in standard tuning. So once you learn it, it's always accessible. It's always there because it never changes. So just keep that in mind, that I know a lot of times, I know for me, a lot of times early on, there was this like moment of thought of like, what's the next chord? Like, what is that next chord again? Because I didn't ever really stop and think like, well, I'm in E and I'm playing a blues song. So it's 1, 4, 5. Like it doesn't ever change. Like, Tom, the next chord's A. What comes out? What do you do after that? You're like, well, what do you mean? What do you do after that? It's the same thing that you've always done. Like, it will never change because we're in the key of E. Now, you may push back and go, well, what if there's more chords involved? Then you actually have to learn what the chord progression is. But there will be a 1 chord, there will be a 4 chord, and there will be a 5 chord in there somewhere. And there's been many a time when I'm playing like in a spontaneous sort of thing, and they may have extra chords in there, but I can tell when those 1, 4, 5s are going to be coming. And so as long as I know where those are great locators. If you know where your 1, your 4, your 5 is, if we do an end tag, a very famous end tag is 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And you've seen it in C a lot. All that ragtime stuff. That's just, so if I know where my 1 chord is, and my next chord is a 6, well, I know where my 6, if that's my 5, my 6 is just up a whole step. If I know where my 1 chord is, I know where my 2 chord is, because a 2 is just a whole step up from 1. And I know where my 5 chord is already, and so I go back to 1. So knowing your 1, 4, 5 gives you access to those next chords, because they're just right up. They're either a whole step up or a whole step down. I mean, really, if we're looking at it. So that end tag, you could do this. Trouble in mind. Well, I'm blue. Yeah, I won't be blue always. Where that sun gonna shine my back door someday. So, sun gonna shine my back door someday. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And again, once you learn that, it never changes. unless you change your tuning, then it will, obviously. But so what I wanted to do with the first chunk of time here was really methodically go through all of the different 1, 4, 5s in E, A, B, up the neck, and give you all the different spots, all the different places. And what I wanted to do kind of from that is go, okay, great. Like, now I know where they are, and I kind of have a sense of how to access them and what to do with them. The next thing, specifically for me, and again, I'm kind of just walking through my progression of this, which I've done a lot of teaching over the last year, and it seems to kind of check a lot of boxes, specifically for people who are in that intermediate guitar playing skill level, which I am an intermediate guitar player for sure, but I know a lot about just the blues, specifically pre-war country blues stuff. But as far as like skill level, I consider myself an intermediate guitar player, just as probably as much as many of you do as well. And so as I've tried to understand this stuff and how to use it, and wanting to use it without thinking, because that's the main goal here, is to go, I don't want to think about what I'm going to be doing. I just want to be able to do it. And the only way to do that is to methodically go up and down the neck with those different chord shapes. Pick any song you want and just start moving up and down the neck. And you're going to have a very great understanding. Now, every single chord, this is the part that I think is, I appreciate that. The part that really got exciting to me was when I stopped looking at the chords as what key I was in. And this is what I mean by that, is that instead of looking at this as an E chord, I started just, I'm like, well, it's a D chord. That's all it is. So anything I know how to do out of D, I can now just do up here in the key of E. And so let me give you, and so this is where every chord shape has that scale to it. So if you know the major scales out of your chord shapes, you can play them in any key up and down the neck. But what I really like is every chord in the blues specifically has a dominant riff. Now you can come up with any riffs you want, but there are what I call dominant themes, dominant riffs that go with every single one of these chord shapes. So now if I'm going to play an E, I'm going to be playing off of 3rd, 2nd, open, 3rd, 2nd, open on the B and the E string, 2nd, open on the G string, 2nd, 1st, open, 2nd, 1st, open, 3rd, open. So you've all heard this, I'm sure. That riff, all I'm doing, again, I'm just playing any combination of 3, 2, open, 3, 2, open, 2, open. And then I can do bass stuff. The dominant riff. Open, 3, 2, open, 2nd fret on that G string, that A note, open G to my E. So that is the dominant riff out of my E chord. This is the part that I got so excited when it dawned on me about this. If I simply just move that E chord to any other key, so let's say I'm playing in the key of G, there's the riff. I can move it up to A. And you might be going, yeah, that's the minor pentatonic scale. And I go, yes, that is. But I'm not looking at it as a scale, because the scale is that. But there's more notes to be played than that's in the scale. I'm adding extra passing notes that aren't in the scale. So I don't like to think of scales because there's more notes that you can play than are in the scale themselves. So I like to look at chord shapes and go, here's the dominant theme out of this chord shape. And I can now move that to any key, in A, in B, F, So once that made sense to my brain, when I went, oh, okay, well, anything I know in E, I can just move the key. B. Now that I know that one trick in E, I can literally play in any key. And when I first started, I only knew how to play an E because I was learning John Lee Hooker songs. And he only played one chord songs. He played an E and he played an A. And his A stuff was actually in open to it was an open A. And so that was a whole other learning curve. But all of his E stuff revolved around all it was just all shuffle, and then he'd do those bass notes, or he'd do play offing of that. And so when I started playing with other people and there would be a chord change, I'd go, gosh, I don't know what to do with A, but I can just play A here, and now I'm just playing my E chord. So I can do the same thing. And maybe I don't know what to do with B. Well, I can just move my E chord to the key of B, and now I can do that riff in B. So if I'm in a jam, it may surprise you, but I hardly play in the key of G. It just, if I was playing bluegrass, I'd be in G all day long. But in the blues spectrum, you're playing E and you're playing A, you're playing C and you're playing D. There's not a whole lot of songs in G if you think about the whole country blues spectrum. Yes, there are songs in G, but they're mostly ragtime songs. There's not a whole lot of I don't even think there's one Delta blues song that is in G, that uses G. It just doesn't happen. If you find one, you can prove me wrong. But but point is that so my knowledge is mostly in E and A, C and D. And so if I'm going to play with other people and they're like, hey, this song is in the key of G, I go, I don't know all my G stuff, but very well. So I just go, well, I can play G there. I can play G there. I know my D, I know my E, and I know my D. Unfortunately, A is way up there, so I'm kind of, unless I'm playing electric guitar, I'm a little bit screwed there. Point being is I don't have to know how to play in every position, in every key. I can just know how to play in E and A and C and D or whatever, or just pick one. You could just play, you can play, if all you know how to play is in D, I got the key to that highway where I'm built, bound to go, where I'm leaving here running, 'cause walking is most too slow. That's the whole song in D, with D figure. And you could do that with any of the chords. If you want to do everything in A, well, I got the key to that highway where I'm built and bound to go, where I'm leaving here running, walking is most too slow. I just played the whole progression with an A chord. So knowing how to do everything in all the different chords, you don't have to do that. But again, back to what I was talking about is this. That works in any key. So that's the E riff. Now, the next chord is the D, which is where we get this. This riff is just to play off of here. If this is a D major chord, again, I'm in the key of E, I realize that. If that's major, then that's the 7th. Because if that's major, that's the 7th. That's just the 7th variation. I'm just playing a D7 at this point. So again, if I wanted to play a minor, there's D minor, well, there's E minor. So all of these major chords, you have major, 7th, and minor. And every single chord shape has that. major, 7th, minor. And you just move that up and down the neck. But what this is just G string, B string. And again, we're out of that at the 4th fret, which is where our D shape lies. And there's that root note there. So I can just brush up with 1 through 3, come back to E in first position. So I'm going second position, first position. Or I can individually pick the strings and go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And now what am I doing? I'm playing from this shape to this shape. So I can start combining that. I can go. I can start combining the two chord shapes together. Again, and this is how riffs are built. This is how solos are built. So the E dominant riff is that. The D dominant riff is that. Now, moving up, our next E chord was a C. This is, if we play in C, there's this riff. Now I'm going to move all that up to the ending at the 7th fret. Seven, 6, 5, 8, 5. There's the 6th. There's the root. That's the next dominant one. So I've got Is that making some sense? Again, I'm just picking out notes out of the chord shapes themselves. And if I just play around, I can start going from one chord shape to the next chord shape to the next chord shape, which builds these linear lines. And as long as I play any notes out of those dominant themes, those are all right notes. There's no wrong notes there. You can't screw that up. Yes, Spike Driver Blues is in G, and it's a one chord song. Like I said, there are a few in G. Blind Boy Fuller recorded a handful in G as well, but again, it's not a dominant. I mean, Mississippi John Hurt played far more in C and E than he did in G. I'll just throw that out there. So again, I'm trying to methodically go through each of these chords and show you the dominant themes. So that's C. And then now we've got A. A and G are going to be connected here. So this is probably the second most famous riff to be used in E. And it's the 7th and the 8th fret. 7th on the E, 8th on the B. All that is, if I make here's my A. If I make an A minor, that's where that riff comes from. But it also comes from C as well, because we all have heard. So these are connecting notes from A to C. Speaking of this as a double stop, it's going to connect with our G shape run, which is going to be 12th on the B string, 10th on the E string. So we've got that would be a little solo over E. Again, I'm just playing those dominant themes out of all of the chord shapes. So I'd play an E run. And then I'm going to go to my A chord. Now, you can do a solo that follows the chord changes. So a solo can follow the chord changes, or a solo can remain in the root key that it's in. So you could play those E figures over A and over B, and you'd be perfectly fine. However, when you're playing solo, that becomes a little bit tricky because you kind of need somebody to play those changes. So somebody has to play those changes. If you were playing an A chord and we were in the key of E, I could play E over A and it would sound fine. And I could do it over B and it would sound fine. But when you're by yourself and you don't have someone to provide those chord changes for you, it's kind of more or less the thing you do would be follow the chord changes in the solo, as opposed to just playing. I call that playing through the chord changes when someone else is having the chord progression behind you. And whether it's a piano, another guitar, whatever it would be, you would play through the changes. As a soloist, you're going to follow the chord progression. And we're going to do the same sort of thing, because now that I know that like the dominant riff in E is there, and my A1 is there, I can make choices now. I've got my A chord. So I can take that riff, which is what we did up here. I can move it down to A, or I can play my E riff, which I'm going to move to the key of A right there, or I could play my D riff, which is right there because there's my D chord. So now when I do my solo in A, I can just build off of those. So I could go E, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Back to E. Now B, what I tend to do, and almost everybody else, and this is something that I basically learned from Lightning Hopkins. Lightning Hopkins always played just the B chord. He never did a solo over B. It was like he did a solo over E, he did a solo over A. The B chord was just played the chord. And I think that is because there's no bass note there that you can grab hold of, and you're kind of playing closed positions. And again, if no one else is playing that B chord for you, it begins to sound a little weird, in my opinion. So either play the chord or come up with something that you want to do. But again, if you just want to play that 5 chord, that's a real powerful sound. Then you go back to a riff again. So E, A, back to E. So what I literally did is just borrow the dominant themes up and down the neck. Now, like I said in the beginning of this, did I sit down one afternoon and just work this all out in an hour session? Absolutely not. Like, this has taken me, and this is why I consider myself an intermediate guitar player, because, you know, it's still all, I'm still figuring this stuff out. You know, I mean, you never stop learning, and you never stop growing. And this has taken me little by little by little by little by little, and taking my practice sessions and not going, okay, I've got to learn, you know, I've got to play through my songs today, or what, you know, what am I going to practice today? I mean, when I was learning how to do the cage system, my practice sessions literally consisted of me just playing those chord shapes up and down the neck. And I did that for weeks. I mean, weeks, because I wanted to memorize where those chord shapes were. And you can't do it unless you do it. It doesn't just like dawn on you. You have to do the work. And then I started then I started playing around with just the notes. I'm literally just playing notes out of the chords. Let me see this question. Tom, how much are you aware of the actual chord tones in each position versus riffs and shapes that just work? I am constantly thinking of what chord shape I'm holding. So what I like to think about is, what chord am I holding? And from there, I make a decision. So if I'm holding an E chord, I'm making decisions based on what works with this E chord. If I'm making a D chord, I'm making decisions based off what works here. So I'm constantly looking at the chord and go, you know, even if I only played the notes out of the chord that I was fretting, if I only did... If I simply singled out the notes of the chord shapes, that in and of itself serves as a riff, and it serves as a solo. So that's a great place to just go, okay, if I simply just play the notes that I'm fretting, that I'm holding, if I only just play those, I can't play wrong notes because I'm playing the chord, and then build little passing notes from one shape to the next. And again, constantly thinking about, what am I holding and what am I going to? Because at first, you know, it's not necessarily, it's a big swing to go from this E to this E. I mean, I'm passing up two other spots for that. So do I want to make that big of a swing? Do I want to go all the way from here to all the way there? Or do I want to stop here? Do I want to stop there? And then get there somehow? You know what I mean? Like, those are in the moment decisions that you're going to be able to make once you know where those spots are. And this is why improvisation is impossible to teach, because you can only improvise with what you know. Improvisation isn't playing what you don't know, because you cannot play what you don't know. It's impossible. And I don't care how much acid and pot and whatever. I like, quote Gary, throw every Jerry Garcia video up that you want to. He knew what he was playing. Like he wasn't playing what he didn't know, because he wouldn't have been able to do it. That's just the way that it works. Now we can all watch that and go like, whoa, that was far out. Like, yeah, it was. It can get far out. And there's players like Steve Kimmock is a great example where who plays in that style where he gets way out there. But if you start talking to him about what he's doing, he's like, I'm playing triads. That's all I'm doing is playing triads. So they're like, oh, so you do know what you're doing. He's like, I'm very aware of what I'm doing. So you can't play you can't improvise with what you don't know how to do. Improvisation to me, and again, a lot of musicians who either just don't know how to talk about it or explain it, or they like to treat it as this mythical thing or this magical thing, and it certainly can be. But all improvisation is making split-second decisions based on what you know how to do. And the more you know how to do it, the faster you can make those decisions. Like looking at Tommy Emmanuel, who, love him or hate him, he's making very, very, very fast decisions. Like he's playing everything in the kitchen sink and making really, really quick decisions. But he's making decisions based on what he knows how to do. And that's the same thing with this stuff. So whether you take songs, again, these riffs that exist in these chord shapes, like, baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans, for I love you so, for I love you so. Yeah, now, now my right hand is doing some fancy stuff, but all I'm literally doing is playing from this E to that E. Baby, please don't go. There's that E. Baby, please don't go. There's the 7th. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. There's that dominant riff. For I love you so. For I love you so. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. For I love you so. For I love you so. And then we're just going to riff around and riff around and riff around and all of those different things. So again, one more time, just for the fun of it. E, A, B. E, A, B. E, A, B. E, A, B. And a bonus A right there. Dominant riffs out of that E. Dominant riffs out of D. Dominant riff out of C. Dominant riff out of A. Dominant riff out of G. And again, you can use any one of those dominant riffs in the key in E. And then when you go to your A, again, you were just recycling. There's that A. Well, if I do my G out of that A, here's that dominant riff in A. If I'm doing my E, here's that dominant riff there. If I'm doing my D, again, there's that there. So on and so forth. So, a couple different songs to just kind of play around with. Key to the Highway. To that highway. Well, I'm built and bound to go. Well, I'm leaving him running. Walking moves too slow. And baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. All based on that. The last thing I want to mention, and I realize that this is a tremendous amount of information, which, again, you're going to have access to the video and watch it over and over again. If you can't sleep, watch it. If you need to go through it little by little. And when you go through this, again, if you know some stuff, just, you know it. Don't worry about it. And then go to stuff that you don't know and pinpoint that. But the last thing I want to talk about is a few different turnarounds. Again, we're just walking from one shape to the next. So D, down, to E. That's a dominant. That's probably the most common one that you're going to do out of this shape. Same tonality, but again, if I move to the key, if I move myself and I'm in the key of C, so if I was doing a C1, we got this great double stop built into C from our B string and our D string. And we're walking from this E to this E, and we're going double stops. So you've got that's a great fun one. Same kind of idea here on strings 1 and 2. To our D shape. Again, every chord, I would say every chord has a dominant turnaround built into it. That's D to E. Here's A to C. There's there's C to D. And then of course we all know the famous Robert Johnson turnaround, which he does in the key of A, but he uses it everywhere. That's just a turnaround where we're going 12, 11, 10, 9. And that's the A turnaround. So again, or any lick can be a turnaround as well. Like, the thing about it, is there more than that? Well, of course there is. You can come up with anything you want, really, and make it a turnaround, as well as you can come up with anything you want and make it a riff. But those are the dominant ones that exist within the chord shapes that we're holding. And that's what I wanted to communicate mostly in these sessions. Whether you're just here for the E session, or I'm going to literally do this in every key for the next, until March or April. I'm every first Friday of the month. Next one is going to be in the key of A. So I'm going to walk you through how to play in A and play a couple different songs and work through that. So at the end of this, for those of you who are going to be joining me, you're going to be able to play in every single one of these keys up and down the neck. You're not going to have to you're going to know what to do and not have to go, what's this or what's that? You're just going to know. And yes, again, like I said, there's more to it than just this. But if you know the main words, it's like learning a language, like if you know the main words, you can communicate well enough. Now, as you grow in your awareness of how to communicate, obviously you're going to learn more words and more words and more words, and it's going to make you more of a skilled linguist in that language. And that's the same thing here. The more you do this, it's going to make sense to how to do beyond this. So take this stuff and run with it as best you can. And I'm going to end it there. And again, I just want to say this is a tremendous amount of information. And if you simply just know where all of your 1, 4, 5 spots are for E, all your EABs, that's a huge wealth of knowledge, because then you can just base your riffs, your scales, your licks, all on those chord positions. So that's step 1 that you need to do. And then you can do the riffs, then you can do the turnarounds. And lastly, go back, the way that this really solidified for me is I went, not only did it solidify this for me, it made and it makes all of the songs I play never old. Because once I learned how to do an aspect of this, I would go back to a song I could already play, and I started inserting these ideas into those songs, which made those songs really new again for me. And I was like, and so I've never gotten tired of playing Robert Johnson. I've never gotten tired of playing Mississippi John Hurt. I've never gotten tired of playing any of that music. Well, why? Because as soon as I learned something new, I went back to those old songs I knew, and it made them new again for me. And that was the best practice field for me, was taking those songs I already knew, because you don't need new songs for this. You need to work on songs you've already known. Like, you know how to play them. You don't have to think about them. You've been playing them for months, maybe years. Those are the songs you'd use these new ideas with, because that's going to yield the greatest steps forward. It's going to be the best, progression for you. And then you can start hearing it in new songs. Like, you'll start recognizing, like, oh, that's that turnaround. I've heard that before. Like, oh, okay, I know where that is. Or, oh, that riff. Man, that one riff. Oh, that's where that is. Like, you'll start to hear it in other things. So, man, I've talked your guys' ears off for an entire hour plus. I really hope that you've enjoyed this. This, if you can't tell, is extremely exciting for me. I love it. It's something that I focus a lot on just in my own personal time. I play through every little thing. I might spend a whole practice session, like if I have an hour or two that I play in a day, it's not uncommon for me to take that whole 2 hours and play from one chord shape to the next and just play the notes and see how they connect, and then, and see what can I get away with, and what's this, what's that. And it's just experimenting, and it's just fun. And so I hope that this will be that for you. And I'm going to upload this video and send out the emails, so you'll have it. It takes about an hour or two for it to upload, but it's going to go out tonight, so you should have it tonight or by the first thing tomorrow morning. If for some reason you don't get it, just send me an email and I will send it out to you again if for whatever reason you didn't get it. To answer your question, finger picks versus not. It depends on what sound you want. I don't like finger picks anymore because I don't like the metallic sound of the pick against the string. Even if it's a plastic pick, it has a tone that is not pleasing to me. I like a thuddy tone, but that's specific to me. There's no like one player out there that like, oh, I'm trying to emulate that tone. I just like I like a thuddier tone than a bright, crisp tone. So you just have to decide what tone do you like, and go from there. Any in-person workshop in the future? I have no idea. I'll just say that. Hopefully, hope so. Nothing planned for this winter. We'll see what happens next year. And, a lot of that is facilitated on somebody hosting it. The host this is oversharing, obviously, at this point, but hosting and teaching at the workshops, which I have done specifically here in Minneapolis, where I'm hosting and doing the workshops, gets a little bit overwhelming to take care of the food, take care of like where we're doing all of the hosting aspects of it. And then to come up with all of the teaching stuff and all of that stuff, it got to be a little overwhelming for me personally. So if somebody wants to host an in-person one and any of that, then that's kind of more facilitated on that end. Do you have any paid Vimeo lessons for Lightning Hopkins? Baby, please don't go. No, I did teach Pink Anderson's version of that, which is very similar. I've stayed clear. Lightning Hopkins is one of my favorite artists. And The reason why I don't teach as much on Lightning Hopkins as I would like is because 90% of what he did was improvised. He played in E and he played in A. He had a couple songs in C, again, maybe like one in G, but everything else was in E and A. And so what I like to do is I've taught an E blues that he did, Bring Me My Shotgun. It's a great one to learn. And once you learn that one song, he's just building on that theme. And like there, if you go to like listen to Baby Please Don't Go, 90% of that is improvised. And so to teach like, oh, here's every solo he did is a little bit, I don't like doing that. I like saying, here's the theme, it's EAB. Here's the basic main principles that he's using out of those themes. And now you can just make it, you can just go along with it as much as as much as you can do. But his version of Baby Please Don't Go, specifically if you go online, if you've never seen him do it live, stop right now, go on YouTube, look up Lightning Hopkins, Baby Please Don't Go, and you're going to see a person who's in complete command of his instrument and his whole ethos as a musician. It's really, really remarkable. So, if there's nothing further, again, it's such a treat and such a pleasure to be able to be here in this environment with you guys. And I hope that this has been informative and fun and will yield great results for everybody. And I am going to sign off and say goodnight. And I'm going to take my kids out to dinner. That's what I'm doing after this. So it was a pleasure. And I will see everybody down the road. I'm going to end the session. And I will, if I can see it, yes, I can. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you hopefully next time. All right. Bye, guys.